The observation deck hummed with the quiet efficiency of a warship at rest. Outside the reinforced viewports, the debris field of what had once been the Crovis battle station drifted in silent testament to the day's violence. Inside, Lieutenant Mara Cade sat alone at the strategy table, her fingers tracing the holographic readouts that still flickered with casualty reports. She hadn't expected company, certainly not the kind that now huddled beneath her table. The Thrakren were apex predators by every measure the galaxy understood, 8 feet tall at maturity, with obsidian scales that could deflect plasma fire and claws that could rend starship hulls. Their species had conquered 14 systems before humanity had even achieved faster-than-light travel. They were fear incarnate, engines of war wrapped in flesh and fury. But these weren't warriors. These were cubs. Mara had found them in the wreckage of a Thrakren cruiser, 3 juveniles no more than 5 cycles old, huddled in an escape pod that had lost life support hours before her squad breached it. Their guardian, a female warrior whose name Mara would never know, had died securing them inside. The emergency beacon had been activated with her last breath. Protocol said to hand them over to the enemy exchange. Let the Thrakren sovereignty deal with their own orphans. After all, this was war. These cubs would grow into the same monsters humanity had been fighting for 3 brutal years. Mara had ignored protocol before. Now, 16 hours later, the 3 cubs had refused to leave her side. They followed her through the corridors of the UNSC Defiant, their predatory instincts somehow recognizing safety in her presence. The crew had been understandably nervous, even juvenile. Thrakren possessed strength enough to kill, but Mara had vouched for them with the weight of her rank and reputation. She looked down now at the space beneath her table. The 3 cubs had curled together in a pile, their breathing synchronized in the deep rhythm of exhausted sleep. Their scales, still soft with youth, rose and fell. Cub Inar, the youngest, had his small head resting on his siblings' backs, his clawed hands twitching occasionally with dreams. They should have been terrifying. Instead, they looked impossibly small. Mara stood slowly, careful not to disturb them. The temperature on the observation deck had dropped. The environmental systems always prioritized combat zones over auxiliary spaces. She could see the slight shiver that ran through Cub Inar's frame, the way his scales tried to contract against the cold, without thinking about what it meant. Without considering the absurdity of the gesture, Mara walked to the storage locker and retrieved her personal thermal blanket. It was military issue, designed to retain heat in hostile environments. It had kept her alive during the siege of Arcturus. It had been her only comfort in the frozen trenches of Helios Prime. She returned to the table and knelt down slowly. The cubs didn't stir. Their exhaustion ran deeper than simple fatigue. It was the bone-deep weariness of trauma, of having their world torn apart by forces they couldn't understand. Mara knew that feeling intimately. She unfolded the blanket and, with movements that spoke of unexpected tenderness, draped it over the sleeping cubs. She made sure to tuck the edges around Cub Inar's small form, ensuring the youngest would stay warm through the ship's night cycle. For a moment, she simply crouched there, watching them breathe. In sleep, they weren't the future soldiers of an enemy empire. They weren't weapons waiting to be wielded. They were just children who had lost everything. "You're going soft, Lieutenant." Mara didn't turn at the voice. Commander Zhang had a habit of appearing without announcement. She heard him step closer, his boots barely whispering against the deck plating. "Permission to speak freely, sir?" Mara asked, still watching the cubs. "Granted. I don't think I am." Zhang was quiet for a long moment. Then he knelt beside her, his eyes on the unlikely scene beneath the strategy table. "The Admiralty wants them sent to the exchange point at dawn. Say it's a gesture of good faith. Might help with the ceasefire negotiations. And if the negotiations fail, then we'll be at war with them again. And those cubs will grow up to remember that humans saved them, or that we used them as bargaining chips." Mara finally looked at her commander. Zhang's face was weathered with the weight of command, lined with decisions that had saved thousands and damned thousands more. But his eyes in this moment held something she rarely saw in the military: uncertainty. "What would you do, sir?" she asked. Zhang smiled, tired and sad. "I'd probably do exactly what you're doing, but I've got 3 stars on my shoulder that say I can't afford that luxury anymore." He stood, his joints creaking slightly. "You've got until 600 to make a decision, Lieutenant. After that, it's out of both our hands." He left as quietly as he'd arrived. Mara remained kneeling, one hand resting on the edge of the blanket. Beneath it, Cub Inar stirred slightly, a small sound escaping his throat, something between a whimper and a purr. Without waking, his small clawed hand reached out and grasped the fabric, pulling it closer. The gesture was so achingly familiar, so universally childlike, that Mara felt something crack in her chest. Humanity had earned its reputation in the galaxy through strength, through resilience, through the stubborn refusal to surrender even when outmatched. The Thrakren, called humans the Death Worlders, claimed they fought with the fury of a species born to hostile skies. The galaxy had learned to fear human tenacity, but perhaps that wasn't what made humanity dangerous. Perhaps it wasn't their capacity for violence that should terrify the stars. Perhaps it was this, the ability to extend mercy to the children of enemies, to see innocence in the offspring of monsters, to wrap warmth around the vulnerable even when logic screamed against it. Perhaps humanity's greatest weapon had always been the stubborn, illogical, beautiful insistence on compassion. Mara stood, her decision made. She would face whatever consequences came at a 600. But tonight 3 cubs would sleep warm and safe, wrapped in a blanket that smelled of human kindness. She didn't say a word. She didn't need to. Some gestures transcended language, species, and war. Outside the viewport, the stars burned cold and distant. But beneath a strategy table on a human warship, 3 predator cubs dreamed of safety, and a human soldier stood guard over their sleep. The galaxy would learn what that meant in time.